Thank you so much, Max, for sitting with me again today for Palestine Talks. I'm hoping we can talk about Gaza, the Israeli military, and your recent trip to Iran. Before we get into all that in earnest, I'm hoping you can shed light on the recent statement, and this is verbatim, the joint statement from the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Canada on the situation in Gaza and the West Bank, where on the surface at least, they seem to be concerned with the egregious actions, as it's stated in the statement, of the Israeli government. And the statement, as I'm sure you know, speaks to the blockade and the refusal of Israel to let in food. Is there any promise in this rather unusual statement from the West that might be too little, too late?
Well, it's certainly too little, too late from a group of states that have given Israel too much, as a genocidal assault on Gaza was clear from the beginning and was signaled within hours of October 8th by key Israeli officials. These Western European nations played a key role in shielding Israel from diplomatic accountability, providing it with weapons. The UK provided Israel with spy flights over Gaza, which have been secret and unaccountable to the British public. Now they're suddenly stepping up, at least with some rhetoric, and the sanctions that they're looking to issue are individual sanctions. That's where the too little comes in. One of the figures they're looking at is Daniela Weiss, a fanatical settler leader who wants to colonize parts of northern Gaza after they're ethnically cleansed. So my theory on what's happening here and why the Europeans, the part of the axis of assistance, has finally stepped up and said what's taking place is abhorrent, is they recognize that the consequences of the apocalyptic final endgame, final solution assault that Netanyahu is waging on Gaza is ethnic cleansing, and that hundreds of thousands of people could be pushed out of Gaza through what Netanyahu calls voluntary migration, but which is anything but voluntary, through the Sinai Desert and ultimately into Europe, and you would have another refugee influx of war-torn refugees, many of them potentially radicalized by watching their entire families be slaughtered before their eyes. This follows refugee waves from Libya, when Muammar Gaddafi, before being betrayed by the West after he normalized relations with them, warned that the shores of Lampedusa in Italy would be flooded with refugees from Africa. That took place after Libya was destroyed and destabilized. The refugee wave from Europe, 1 million refugees following the dirty war which Europe participated in, helped destabilize European politics and led to Brexit. And so this coalition of leaders, Starmer, Macron, they're afraid, I think, of another refugee wave which will drive right-wing populism in Europe and weaken their own domestic base, weaken them domestically. So this is a self-serving statement, in my view. And what also is interesting to look at here is how is the chatter from Israeli accounts on social media threatening Europe. There's one account in particular, open source, or OSINT613 on Twitter, which consistently echoes the messaging of Israel's military intelligence apparatus. And it has warned that if Europe goes forward with targeted sanctions, even individual sanctions, Israel could retaliate in a number of ways, including by ending cooperation, security assistance, and intelligence sharing, which would then trigger, in the words of this account, a wave of jihadist attacks in Europe, which suggests to me that Israel actually maintains jihadist sleeper cells in Europe, which it can activate in order to punish the Europeans, a kind of unconventional Samson option for any accountability for this genocidal assault. And that is absolutely terrifying, as well as revealing about the role Israel plays as a so-called ally. It's actually the ultimate frenemy. And I'm actually unclear about where the friendship lies here. This is blackmail in the extreme.
You alluded to it just a moment ago about it being too little, too late. I'm wondering, why did it take this long? In addition, perhaps, to the reason you mentioned about the fear of, or the right-wing populism fear, and also, maybe I should add, like, how do we ensure that even if this is promising in any way for the Palestinian people, that these states are still held accountable, that people don't forget that it took this long?
Well, I mentioned the threat of right-wing populism as a new refugee wave looms on the horizon. There's also the reality of Palestine solidarity mobilization. We've seen record-sized rallies in the last week or two in Dublin and other parts and throughout the EU, which certainly threaten the centrist neoliberal leadership, which has tried to destroy these factions politically. We saw that with the coup against Jeremy Corbyn, for example. So they're concerned about political instability. The center is failing to hold. They must recognize that the rules-based order that they represent through the transatlantic relationship with the US has been completely discredited through their support, their steadfast support for what I consider to be the Holocaust of our times, and billions of people across the world see it the same way. And just the institutional lack of credibility. Any institution in Europe that seeks to play ball with Israel, including Eurovision, the singing contest where we just saw an Israeli perform, and was the producers of Eurovision actually had to lower crowd noise during the performance of the Israeli singer so that viewers wouldn't hear the loud boos. And they had to play a message before the singer declaring that we still stand with Palestinians for justice and human rights, just to kind of soften the blow and the insult to our conscience of featuring this ghastly display on stage. Institutional credibility is collapsing across Europe. European soft power is completely collapsing. And the European public, whether it's on the right for their own reasons, which may be more sort of nationalistic, or on the left, just no longer support the centrist transatlantic consensus.
And how much have these states, since October, but also before October 7th, profited from their complicity? And I'm wondering if, in a very crass sense, they don't see it now as being profitable, and that has anything to do with this statement.
For the Europeans, I think the Ukraine-Russia proxy war, the Ukraine proxy war is much more profitable. And we saw this surge in sales in their defense industry after Trump humiliated Zelensky in the Oval Office and threatened to cut off arms to Ukraine. And then it became clear what part of Europe's interest is in continuing this fruitless war. But of course, Germany is the second largest supplier of weapons to Israel. And when I say second largest, it's close. It's a close second to the United States. That's not widely recognized. So Germany is not only mobilized by Holocaust guilt and this historic relationship with Israel, which is a way of getting off cheap on the Holocaust, kind of displacing it on the backs of Palestinians. There's also a material interest there. I mean, they supply Israel with everything from Dolphin-class submarines, a deal which Netanyahu exploited to fatten his own paycheck or increase his own coffers, but also cruiser, like fast boats, cruiser-class boats, everything that's needed to maintain the siege of Gaza, as well as tech. So Europe is deeply invested in the special relationship with apartheid Israel, almost as much as the United States. In the United States, you see like Elbit Systems, the Israeli state arms company, putting factories strategically in congressional districts in Texas in order to ensure total support. They'll spread out their factories and then say, we're producing jobs. And then the members of Congress will actually show up at AIPAC and say, I thank Israel for employing people in my own district. And what are they producing? Baby buster bombs, drones that soar into the skies of Gaza and explode children with the push of a button. Those are the job creators in places like Texas, Colorado, and elsewhere.
So it sounds, it's not just Israel, it's other countries that are testing their weapons on Gaza? Is that the case? How can these companies be held accountable legally or otherwise?
One company that I think needs to be looked at with particular scrutiny is Microsoft and the tech industry in general in Silicon Valley, because Israel's genocide in Gaza has been the most high-tech assault in history, and it's using AI, pioneering AI, to do targeting in ways we haven't seen before. I assume the assassination of Mohammed Sinwar, who had taken over for Yahya Sinwar, in a tunnel in Gaza was arranged through AI targeting. That's how he was located there, and 70 civilians were killed in order to kill him. That's sort of been standard operating procedure for Israel. Kill 70 people, burn them alive in their tents, bomb an entire wing of a hospital, bomb a school, slaughter entire families in their homes in order to get one senior Hamas commander who's quickly replaced. And AI is at the center of this. Who's providing the AI technology? Companies like Palantir, which specialize in it, run by ultra-Zionist CEO Alex Karp, but also Microsoft is playing a quieter but much more substantial role as Do Not Panic, a Substack account that tracks the tech industry's involvement with apartheid Israel, has documented. And Microsoft has hired an array of Unit 8200 personnel from Israel's cyber intelligence unit, which oversees these AI genocide programs. They're honeycombed throughout Microsoft's offices. They've helped design Microsoft's Azure cloud hosting program, which actually hosts Israel's Rolling Stone program, which is Israel's program to maintain the entire population registry of Gaza and to track the population's movements in order to kill them. In the same way that IBM helped Nazi Germany maintain the Jewish population registry inside Germany. It's the same level of criminality, the same level of complicity. There's actually a company that Microsoft just signed a deal with called Amdocs. This is a company that was started very secretly in the 1980s by Israeli army veterans and Israeli intelligence veterans, and it has maintained a very secret presence inside the United States. During the George W. Bush era, Amdocs was suspected of spying on the White House and the State Department, and a counterintelligence investigation was initiated, although they ultimately cleared them. Microsoft has just signed a deal with Amdocs to maintain telecommunications services. So we're witnessing that at Microsoft. Meta has hired hundreds of former Israeli army personnel. These are people mostly on the military intelligence side. And so through the tech industry, we are witnessing a vast Israeli intelligence penetration of American industry and American society, which can then be weaponized against the United States in the event of a policy change. I mentioned the threats against Europe before. These developments need to be challenged from inside the tech industry by people who are working there. There has been an enormous amount of activism at Amazon, at Google, and elsewhere. Google, which just signed a $35 billion deal with the Israeli firm Wiz, which was founded by Unit 8200 veterans, delivering a massive cash cow to the Israeli state, which was starving for revenue after October 7th. So these have to be challenged from inside the tech industry. It's important for everyone watching this to understand that if you recognize that what we're witnessing is the Holocaust of our time in the Gaza Strip, and you are in a position where you can provide information or blow the whistle about complicity with the institution you're working in. It could even be a Jewish institution in the United States because you were able, as a Jew, to get on the inside, or a tech company, or you are a police officer getting offered training with Israeli police personnel. Wherever you are, you have the ability to blow the whistle, and it's time for people to start stepping up and use their positions as insiders to blow the whistle on this genocide, and it really starts with the tech industry.
Right. And these companies, they're documenting the quote-unquote performance of these weapons that they're using in Gaza. And so they are. So what happens to this information? Does it get sold to states to, for them to figure out how to carry out more military-led atrocities?
That's one of the keys to the productive sector of Israel's economy, is that according to journalist Yotam Feldman, an Israeli dissident journalist who produced a documentary, I think it's about 12 years old, called The Lab, about Israel's military intelligence industry, about 100,000 families, virtually the entire upper middle class in Israel, has some role or some material interest in the arms industry. And Israel's weapons, a lot of them are good, for sure. They are at least, they're as advanced as American weapons. But what the advantage that they have is that they can go to any weapons fair around the world and market them as field tested, because Israel is constantly at war. And now the field testing is taking on new levels that we can't even imagine, including quadricopters that will fly into schools and private homes and assassinate individuals. Who knows? It's still like a matter of debate what was used to kill Ismail Haniyeh inside Tehran, but that's certainly something Israel would seek to market. They have all of these opportunities to carry out hideous and daring acts of violence because of the nature of their state, the unstable nature of the Israeli state and the logic of Zionism, which sort of requires them to be constantly in conflict, to occupy a population of restive indigenous people simply because they are not Jewish and cannot fit into a state, which Netanyahu just reaffirmed last week is not a state of all of its citizens. It is the state of the Jewish people. So this provides a boon for the arms industry as well as intelligence. Like if you take a direct flight from Tel Aviv to New York or Atlanta or somewhere, chances are you might be sitting next to someone who's on their way to train security personnel privately or with some state agency in their know-how. And they're so revered within like the NYPD or within corporate, within corporations. Israelis carry this reputation. It's a reputation bathed in blood.
Yes, well, that's a perfect segue for this question I have here, which bears on Israel's reputation, or what was its former reputation, as being the quote-unquote only democracy in the Middle East. And of course, that's been exposed as a myth since October 7th, but of course before that. And before our interview today, you had some very interesting observations you shared with me about the consequences for Israel or Israeli society long-term that aren't really being addressed in mainstream media. I'm wondering if you can speak to that. Like, what is going to happen to Israel and Israeli society after, if we can put it this way, after the genocide ends or after the hostilities end in Gaza? What are people who are from Israel, for example, traveling overseas, going to experience after something like this?
Well, domestically, Israel's going to go through a major shift, which will be brought about through internal strife, kind of civil conflict. I mean, sitting here, it's hard to even predict when this ghastly horror will end, when we'll stop waking up and opening our Twitter accounts and social media accounts and seeing images of shredded children. It's just been going on for so long. And I think many people expected that after several months of that, it would come to an end, because it just seemed unfathomable at this point in human history that could take place for so long. What can we attribute that to? To Jewish Israeli nationalists, that can be attributed to what they call an iron society, national resilience, that they were willing to go all the way to total victory. And what is total victory? Within the realm of, in the framework of Zionism, total victory is ethnic cleansing. It's the completion of the genocide, the genocidal process that began in 1948, which can deliver them an ethno-religiously pure state free from these indigenous contaminants. And getting the people of Gaza out is a priority. The majority of them are refugees. They have a militant mentality. They're not going to stand down like the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. Got to get them out of there. How can you get them out of there without just having the will to slaughter them, shooting and bombing children as a kind of hobby? You have to have a deeply, deeply right-wing, messianic society, particularly among the youth, that are pushing the buttons, that are doing the killing. And through this transitional process that really was consolidated with Netanyahu's election in 2009, and he's now the longest serving Israeli prime minister, they have been under this kind of right-wing messianic regime for long enough to have reached the point where they can just keep the killing going on a society-wide basis indefinitely, and they will be able to get the weapons because of their vast, powerful lobby and movement throughout Western capitals from Brussels and Washington indefinitely as well. They'll have enough bunker buster bombs for the next year. So their ability to shed blood was underestimated, including probably by Hamas. I mean, I think the theory of change of Tufan al-Aqsa flood on October 7th, did not include this going on for this long. They assumed some kind of deal would have been brokered. But this is going to come with major consequences for Israel. Their pursuit of total victory, of a final solution, which, I mean, so many Israeli young people I spoke to just wanted, they would say, we just need to push the button. And I wish they would all just disappear and die. And this is their chance. But that will come with a consequence. There's still a sector of Israeli society that does not see that as a resolution, that considers it to be even inhumane, and believes Netanyahu sacrificed the hostages in order to maintain this messianic fanatical coalition and pursue total victory and keep himself in power for as long as possible. They're in the streets, but they're going to be pushing to topple this government. There's also going to be pressure from the far-right faction, the Kahanist faction, which has gained so much strength through this war. The Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir's, who he just had a speaking tour in the United States where he found a large audience for his genocidal ideas. They're going to be vying for more power, and we're going to see a contest in Israel for, I think, what could be sort of the terminal phase of Zionism after Netanyahu. Israel without Netanyahu is going to face a lot of turbulence because Netanyahu has sort of united a lot of these factions. Before October 7th, he had prevented a major war like this. He'd always tried to negotiate his way out of it, and then he went fully into it. But most importantly, Netanyahu was the most important propagandist for Israel on the world stage ever, and the most effective one. He spoke perfect English. He's a product of the United States, of a high school in Philadelphia, of MIT, worked in Boston Consulting with Mitt Romney. He's as American as any American president, but he's also defined Israel, and he has this direct link to Israel's mythology through his brother Yoni, who died in the Entebbe raid. So there's no figure after Netanyahu that can stand in his stead. So I see turbulence and social strife in Jewish Israeli society beginning as soon as there is a ceasefire and Netanyahu leaves the stage. On the world stage, I think it's pretty obvious where Israel's going. It is a pariah. And you have a generation of Americans and Europeans and people around the world who see Israel as the new Nazi Germany, which is tragic for me because, I mean, what is Israel's national logo? It's the symbol of my faith community. They've turned it into a swastika. A lot of Jews are disgusted by this as well. Look at polls of American Jews, liberal American Jews. They simply no longer support Israel. It's only Jews who have come from a conservative background and are raised in religiously hermetic, closed settings that tend to support it. That conflict is going to grow in the coming years, and it's not going to ever move back into Israel's direction. So the only way out for Israel going forward is more warfare and more threats and bribery of its so-called allies who are actually just too terrified to cut it off. We even saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Trump's key allies in the MAGA faction in Congress, suggest that she could be targeted with assassination for condemning Israel's actions and demanding a cutoff in aid to Israel, for condemning AIPAC. She actually tweeted that. She said, I am a happy and healthy person and I would never take my own life. So, I mean, they know it. They know that, every Western leader, I think, knows that they face the threat of assassination if they turn on this monstrous apartheid entity.
Well, hearing you speak about Israel right now, it's so violent, so hateful, even when you talk about those persons that you met who want to press the button. It sounds like this is beyond bad politics. It's pathological. Do you think that's going too far to call it pathological?
Yeah, sociopathic.
It is pathological, you would say, yes.
I mean, you really have to be a sociopath to bear hug Netanyahu as Biden did. You have to be a sociopath to look at what's taking place there and not use your leverage.
And I'm hoping, on a positive note, it will impress on people the urgency with which they should engage in, say, Palestinian solidarity or do something to stop the genocide. And I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts or observations.
Well, these are troubling times. I remember our last talk in Washington, and we were talking about many of the same themes.
Yes.
And again, it's just so dismaying and somewhat depressing that we're the way that we're having these conversations is within the just abominable framework of an ongoing genocide. So I hope the next one we have takes place outside that framework,
Yes.
and we're able to form a more long-term vision of how to prevent this from happening again. But it's still important not to lose motivation and to keep hope alive.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much, Max.
Thanks a
Grateful.
lot for having me.
Thank you.